If you own a property you don't actually live in, a rental, a vacation home, something like that, let me ask you something. Are you absolutely sure it's insured correctly? Because a simple mistake here could literally cost you everything. Today, we are going to talk about a super important but often misunderstood policy, dwelling fire insurance. Okay, let's just dive right into this. You've got insurance on your rental property, of course. But are you positive it's the right kind of insurance? Because here's the thing. Having the wrong policy can be just as bad, if not worse, than having no policy at all. And this is the honest-to-goodness truth. If you're using a standard homeowner's policy for a property that you don't live in, that policy might be completely worthless. If you have to make a claim, the insurance company could have every right to deny it, leaving you to cover what could be a catastrophic loss all on your own.
So, why is that? Why doesn't your standard policy work? Well, it all comes down to one fundamental requirement that a lot of people just overlook: occupancy. You see, standard policies, like a typical HO3, are designed for one very specific purpose: a home that's occupied by the owner.
A standard policy just isn't built for these kinds of situations. I mean, if you rent to tenants, the risks are totally different. If the home is vacant for a while, the risk of something like vandalism or an undetected water leak just skyrockets. Same goes for a house that's under renovation or maybe an older home with systems that aren't quite up to date. To an insurer, every single one of these is a major red flag that makes the property ineligible for standard coverage.
But hey, don't worry, there is a solution for this. You just need to make sure you're using the right tool for the job. And in this case, that tool is called dwelling fire insurance. It's specifically designed for all those scenarios where a standard homeowner's policy just doesn't cut it.
So what is it exactly? Well, dwelling fire insurance, or DFI, protects the physical structure of the home. We're talking the walls, the roof, the foundation. The key thing to remember is that it's designed for a property you don't personally live in. It covers your building, and then your tenant is responsible for getting their own renter's policy to cover their stuff. Now, not all dwelling fire policies are created equal. They generally come in three main flavors, and you can think of it like a good, better, best system: the DP1, the DP2, and the DP3. But to really understand them, we first have to get our heads around a key insurance concept. Insurance policies work in one of two ways. The first is named peril. Think of it like a concert ticket for just one specific band. It only covers the dangers or perils that are specifically named in the policy document. The second way is open peril, and this is more like an all-access festival pass. It covers everything, unless it's specifically listed as an exclusion. You really got to remember that difference as we look at these policies. Okay, first up is the DP1, the basic form. This is a named peril policy at its most simple, often only covering a few things like fire and lightning. Now, the most critical detail here is how it pays out a claim: actual cash value. What that means is you get what the damaged property was worth today with depreciation, not what it costs to go buy a new one. This is really just bare bones coverage, best suited for vacant or really high-risk properties. Next up, we've got the DP2, or broad form. This is still a named perils policy, but that list of covered perils is a whole lot longer. It adds things like wind, hail, and vandalism. The big upgrade here is that it often pays full replacement cost. So if your 10-year-old roof gets destroyed, you get enough money for a brand new roof. That's a huge, huge advantage. And finally, we have the best of the best, the DP3, or special form. This is that open peril policy we just talked about, the all-access festival pass. It covers your property against pretty much everything, unless a peril like a flood or an earthquake is specifically excluded in the fine print. It almost always pays full replacement cost, which makes it the gold standard and the policy most landlords go for. So let's just look at them all side by side for a second. You can see the clear progression, right? We move from the DP1's very basic named peril coverage with its depreciated payout all the way up to the DP3's comprehensive open peril coverage that pays to replace things new. Choosing the right one is really a balance between your budget, your property's value, and frankly, how much risk you're willing to take. Okay, so theory is great, but let's see how this stuff actually works in the real world. A policy is only as good as the protection it gives you when something actually goes wrong. So let's walk through a couple of pretty common scenarios. So imagine this. Your tenant accidentally starts a fire in the kitchen. The damage is bad, and the house is going to be uninhabitable for months. Your DP3 policy immediately kicks into gear. Not only does it pay to repair all the structural damage, but it also covers you for the rental income you lose while the repairs are being done. That benefit is called fair rental value, and trust me, it can be a total lifesaver for landlords' cash flow. Now, for a totally different kind of risk. A tenant trips on a broken step, gets injured, and decides to sue you. This is where your liability coverage is absolutely essential. It's often an add-on to a dwelling fire policy, but it is so critical. It covers the tenant's medical costs and your legal fees, protecting your personal assets from a lawsuit that could otherwise be financially devastating. So, we've covered the why, the what, and the how. Let's bring this all together into a final, simple guide to make sure you can match the right policy to your property. All right, let's put these two policies head to head. I mean, that first line really says it all. Occupancy. An HO3 requires you to live there. Period. A dwelling fire policy, on the other hand, is built for every other situation. And that one core difference changes everything else, from how personal property is covered to the kind of liability protection you get. They are simply two different tools for two very different jobs. So let's just make this super simple. Here's the big takeaway. If you live in the home, you need a standard HO3. If you rent it out to tenants, you need a DP3. If the property is just sitting empty, you'll want a DP1 or a DP2. And if you're doing a major renovation, you should look into a DP1 or maybe a specific builder's risk policy. The point is, match the policy to the situation. At the end of the day, it all comes down to this. Your real estate is one of the most significant assets you will ever own, and having the wrong insurance policy is like leaving the front door to your biggest investment wide open. So take a look at your policy. Ask the question, is your biggest asset truly protected?